Hello everyone, Richard Lewis with another video here. We're getting back into more esports territory. We're going to talk about something that's kind of a bit long overdue, but I've been busy. Obviously, the E-League preliminaries are underway, so I'm trying to do these videos in between filming. And there's been a lot going on, and this is, like I say, a little bit overdue. It's about 5-6 days at the time of recording this behind schedule. But I thought it's important that we talk about PEA, which is the Professional Esports Association. Now, I don't know why they call themselves PEA, right? P, but it's just P. It is just P.
It's already a word.
Yeah, you can't have it both ways, but they do call themselves PEA. And basically, this is an association that's very similar to what we saw with WISA, but it's just in the North American region. And what they're looking to do is be an association which has layers, so that there's a body that represents the players within the league. They also have a league. They have an operational aspect to the league. People who sell, a commissioner, people responsible for selling the broadcasting rights for that league. But the key difference here is that whereas ESL kind of had dominion over WISA, as we saw, no matter what they tried to say publicly, this is essentially owned by the team owners, the organization owners. That is the postulation of this league. And they announced that they're going to be doing a $1 million North American only CSGO league. So the official press release came out on the 8th of September. And I'll just read it to you. They put it out by Dropbox. And it was, I've got to say, they did handle the press side of things pretty professionally, Sam. I had an email, and I think Thorin got this as well. I had an email basically saying, oh, we've got a big announcement coming tomorrow, and you dial into this phone number and you can ask questions and all of it. And it didn't really say what the announcement was, but it was all handled very professionally. I know like at Turner, that's what we do with press, like if there's any Q&A sessions, we have them dial in from wherever, where everyone sits around a conference call and people can ask questions and take questions. So it was handled very professionally like that. And then they did put out this press release here. So, Los Angeles, September 8th, 2016. 7 of the premier North American esports teams have joined together under the banner of the Professional Esports Association, PEA, to create an organization dedicated to professional esports and focused on bringing unprecedented benefits to pro players. The PEA will commence operations of its Counter-Strike Global CSGO League in early January 2017. And will showcase the performances of some of the most elite North American pro players. The founding PEA team franchises TSM, Cloud9, Team Liquid, CLG, Immortals, NRG Esports, and Complexity Gaming. Now, just to let you guys understand what's going on here, there's always been a group. This basically stems from League of Legends, where back in LCS, you had 3 owners that really dominated the North American scene and basically all had an agreement together that we're not going to fuck each other up. And we're not going to do that. It's counterproductive to fuck each other up. We need to have harmonious relationships and work with each other as best as we can. And over the course of the development of League of Legends, a few people have been added to that. So you did the core 3, TSM, Cloud9, and Team Liquid. And that's basically Reginald, Andy Din, Jack Etienne, Steve Arnset, and Victor Goosens from Team Liquid. Used to be Hotshot, if people remember him, but he seems kind of less interested these days. And now added to that, they've brought in Immortals, which has got a guy called Noah Winston in there, who's considered to be a very intelligent chap. He did a recent TEDx talk about, kind of player rights and all the layers in esports and people like him. And then over at NRG, you got a couple of guys. You got a guy called Gerard Kelly over there, who's kind of like the guy who deals with the day-to-day business, but isn't very public-facing. And then, of course, at Complexity, you've got the well-liked Jason Lake. And even though he was never really Complexity, were never really a force in League of Legends, he's well-liked. He's very experienced, been around the block. And they've all come together. So this is how it works. And this group has been unofficially in existence for a while. They've made decisions that basically benefit everyone as a whole. And people might remember when there was that SK Gaming petition drama that came up for E-League. You'll see a lot of names here in PEA that are were people that were supporting that petition also, because that's how they do things. They've started to realize that, we need to collectively bargain to get ahead. That's where our strengths are as team owners. Now, the next part of the press release is the PEA represents something new in esports, an association of top teams running their own league and sharing the profits and the decision-making with the players, said Jason Katz, PEA commissioner. This has been the architecture of traditional major sports leagues for many decades, but it is a new evolution for esports. This will allow us to finally build a stable, healthy, long-term environment for the players, the community, the media, and the sponsors. Now, Jason Katz might not be a name that's familiar to a lot of you. I'm going to give you a bit of the history of Jason Katz. He's certainly a divisive figure. And this is my understanding, and this is an understanding that's based on a lot of anecdotal evidence. Certainly, when I first came across Jason Katz, it was when he was involved in the CGS. Now, the CGS, if people don't go that far back, and I know not a lot of you people who watch my YouTube videos do, and I don't blame you. It's hard to stick in esports for 10 years or whatever it was back in 2006. So basically, the CGS had a franchise model, and what people had to do was basically either leave behind the organizations that they were running, as was the case of Odie, who basically put Dignitas in the hands of people he trusted when he came into CGS to run Birmingham Salvo, which was a franchise slot. And, he ended up bringing some Dignitas players in. They were like the best Counter-Strike players at the, Combine tournament that they ran. And so he kind of dipped out of the talent pool that he was aware of. And other people sold their brands to CGS to become a franchise, Complexity being one of them. So Jason Lake knows Jason Katz very well. And indeed, Complexity, just to make things even more fucking confusing, there's also a guy called Jason Bass involved with Complexity as well. So 3 fucking Jasons. Brilliant. But anyway, so Complexity actually sold their brand to CGS and became a franchise in that sense. And basically the agreement was, we take on the Complexity name. That gives us some credibility. Jason Lake comes in and is the GM of the franchise that we just bought, and you have a job for the 5 years that were going to be in existence. Only problem was, of course, they didn't last 5 years. They made 2.5. They blew $60 million by paying over the odds, and they went into the ground. Now, during this time, Jason Katz really acquired a reputation for himself as being a fucking ball buster. And I talked to a lot of owners that were being heavily pressured into selling their franchise, selling their brands, their esports brands that they built up to the CGS in a to be franchised. And that if they didn't do that, they weren't going to be. There was no way they were going to be involved. And this was typical of the CGS at the time. I don't exaggerate when I say this, but they were one of the first entities in esports I really saw be kind of bullying and controlling. Were actually very aggressive in how they dealt with stuff. And it set a worrying trend. It was like this kind of behavior actually continued for some time afterwards, till we get to the stage with Riot Games and things like that, where it was just going completely fucking overboard. And if people who were around at that time will remember, there was a leak, for example, of the franchise names, and you were told if you wrote about this, even if you didn't report it initially and somebody else did, and you wrote about their report, you'd have your press credentials pulled. It was just unbelievable. It was a very controlled environment, very fake and artificial. And by all accounts, Jason Katz was very actively involved in some of the more hard-nosed decisions that the business made. And a lot of people in the industry, certainly higher up than I was at the time, because I was I think I got promoted into being the head of European coverage shortly before we parted ways. Over at CGS, which wasn't a particularly lofty title. I was still essentially a writer, and I did appear on video from time to time. The first video jobs I ever did in esports was for CGS. But, a lot of people a lot further up the food chain than me back then were like, yeah, Jason Katz is a fucking beast. Like, tough guy to fucking work with, tough guy to get along with. Now, Jason Katz as well, so I'm told anecdotally, he did go and get involved with Riot Games when they were the next big thing. And obviously, there's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, that's actually, so far, it sounds like it's a pretty impressive CV. But what people told me there was that Jason Katz was actually, one of the guys who was very actively involved in putting out some of the shitty contracts that the people had to deal with when Riot wanted to start their initial LCS season. And just to, I'll give this link to you, Sam. I didn't give you this ahead of time. If you just want to bring this up, this is an article on GameSpot, and if you scroll down, you can just Control F cats if you want. It's quite a lengthy interview, and this is back in, I believe, 2012, October 2012, this interview. You'll see many of the announcements made around Season 3, including the location of the arena, player contracts, and even the name of the circuit itself, are very reminiscent of the Championship Gaming series. Recently, you hired Jason Katz, one of the top people involved in the league at the time. How influential was that league, and what Jason has brought on? How do you envision Season 3 to be? And they said, honestly, we're not looking to CGS for inspiration. We're looking to mainstream traditional sports to inform what League of Legends esports could become. The similarities between our Season 3 Pro League and the CGS end at regularly scheduled weekly matches. There are a bunch of differences. Chiefly, Riot's the game publisher as well as the esports organization. We view esports as a core feature of League of Legends, so we're all in on supporting it. We're not beholden to investors or sponsors to deliver the quality of entertainment and competition we're building towards. We're only beholden to our players and fans. So very typical Riot answer that doesn't even make any allusion or what explanation of what Jason Katz is doing. But what I always got told was that Jason Katz was, again, he tried to take that CGS model of franchises, and the original LCS contracts for these organizations basically were, we own your brand. We own the history of your brand. We own the logo. We can use your brand for promotional purposes in perpetuity for, and there's just nothing, and that was the original contract that was put out. Now, Alex Garfield reportedly led a revolt against this, but also you have to remember that. But this is the same time when Riot was being incredibly controlling, wanting to dominate the MOBA space. This is the same Riot Games that, of course, told organizations you can't have a Dota team and be part of LCS. You have to choose, and this was again denied. But all the evidence, of course, points to the fact that it was there. I know, I've talked to the owners. They all say it was absolutely true. It went on. And of course, publicly, no one wants to get fucked over by Riot, and certainly not back then. People didn't want to be cut out of LCS. And again, people pointed the finger to Jason Katz for these ridiculous contracts and some of the more hardball tactics that Riot Games were employing. And after that, of course, and this is still a current job that he supposedly does, Jason Katz is over at Azubu, a streaming platform. And again, Azubu have certainly been controversial in their time, certainly prior to the relaunch and during the relaunch as well. I don't think this is a terrible thing to say that Azubu have generated their own share of potentially negative headlines. And Jason Katz has been over there. And to be honest, he stayed out of the headlines. He stayed out of the limelight. But for some of these older people that have been in esports, there is still a bit of ill feeling. Now, a lot of those guys actually were in Europe. Interestingly enough, because the CGS wasn't just North American, even though it did have a very heavily American bias, and it did start in America. But there's a lot of people, even in the North American scene, who are a little bit dubious about him. So when I see his name come up attached to this, I'm not saying I'm skeptical, but I know there's a history there for a lot of people. There will be some people who will not relish the prospect of having to work with Jason Katz. Now, that said, Jason Katz, from my understanding, he's an entertainment attorney. I think that's his background prior to esports. And I think he's certainly got a skill set that when it comes to selling a league and selling broadcasting rights and knowing the space, because he was one of the guys who, over at Azubu, did go out and kind of get talent for Azubu, and actually was one of the guys who he used to determine how much money an Azubu streamer was worth. And seemed to be very generous in that regard. I mean, some of the stories that I never published at the time, but looked into and did the groundwork on. But sometimes you just don't get those stories over the line. You don't get enough to publish, or you have to just leave them. I saw very average streamers that didn't bring in a lot being paid a hell of a lot of money on Azubu. And it made no sense to me, but apparently it was Jason Katz that had determined this. So maybe he's actually not a ball buster, and is actually a very fucking generous guy, right? Like an overly generous guy, or a guy who overvalues the esports product, which again could be potentially worrying for this job, or it could work out all right. I don't know, but as I said, I do know Jason Katz is someone that's had a very mixed history in the space. Now, all of that said, we'll move on to the league, and this is where it gets interesting for me. So twice weekly matches will be streamed live during the 10-week season. Teams will compete for a prize pool of at least $1 million for the first year and $500,000 for season 1. This marks the end of the Wild West days of esports, said Jack Etienne, Cloud9 CEO. The community and players want stability and dependability. Leagues come and go, teams join them and depart, but with the PEA, the teams are making a long-term commitment to be here, playing for the fans for the indefinite future. The benefits to players in the PEA League are completely new in the world of esports. Players and owners will receive an equal 50% share of profits, and each caster will receive a share equal to a player. The PEA will also provide a suite of financial benefits and services to the players, including retirement and investment planning, health insurance, and more. So, again, let's just break this down. So it is going to be another league. It is going to be another 10-week league. We've got another $1 million. And that in itself could inherently be bad, because I think we all know we're at, like, really oversaturation point. There's a lot of leagues that are starting to fill up the space. We've got a lot of Counter-Strike being played. There's a little bit of viewer fatigue going on. We all know it's an issue. And ultimately, we need a kind of holistic season. We can't keep stacking more on the buffet. So this being new and coming in is potentially an issue. But what I actually do like about what is being presented by PEA is this idea of having stability and profit sharing. Because in the past, teams have said, oh, we've got equity in leagues. People will famously remember that ECS reportedly gave all of the teams that agreed to play in it equity in the league. Now, a lot of people say equity. What they mean is profit sharing. Equity and profit sharing are not the same thing. But you often hear people use them like they're interchangeable terms, which they're not. But you will hear about this. And I'm not too sure what's going on over at ECS. My understanding is it's actually a profit share. I don't know. But basically, the bottom line is that what's happening here, for the first time, it's not about trickle down. It's not about the owners make the money from the league and then the owners pass that on in salaries to the player. No, the players will still get the salaries, but the PEA League will directly give money to the players. By all accounts, this is actually, so again, just to sort of pad it out and be a little bit fair, by all accounts, this is actually Jason Katz's idea. So if I do make him sound like a terrible figure, which again, people are complicated, people are layered, right? There's no such thing as someone that's holistically bad or holistically good. So apparently this is his idea from what I've been told. So that's interesting. Now, the numbers are a little bit weird, a little bit fluffy, a little bit woolly, right? Because obviously this is 50% share of profits. So there'll be operational costs for running the league. Then whatever's left over the top, once all of those costs have been met, it will be 50% of it will go to the player, to the owners. Then you'll have a remaining 50%. Now, that 50% is divided by every player in the league. Now, again, I think they want to have a total of 10 teams, so that's 50 players. So that's basically 1% of the profits, going to each of the players. And again, that could be good depending on the profit. But of course, obviously, it's getting divided by 10 owners. So owners are definitely getting a bigger cut, which probably is fair, probably is reasonable. But it remains to be seen how much that profit will actually be. If it's a sizable number, 1% of a lot is great. 1% of not a lot, not so great. That's just maths. So I'm intrigued to see how much profit they're going to be able to generate as a startup league. And actually, that to me is crucial to the whole operation. You look over at Weezer and what they're trying to do, and they've been very quiet and not very active. And maybe it's been a little bit harder than you would think to kind of generate money from a project like that. They recently, Pietro Fringuelli, the lawyer who was the commissioner, made way, and they brought in somebody from HBO, someone formerly of HBO. That suggests to me they're really looking now to sell the broadcasting rights, because that's where that guy's expertise is. So that's what we are looking to do. And it looks like PEA have been formed with that in mind, right? Which is fine. But again, if you fail to make profit, you fail to really offer anything out of the ordinary to players. They do talk here about financial benefits, including retirement and investment planning, health insurance, and that's all great, right? That's great stuff. I don't even know if esports is necessarily there yet, where those kind of benefits would actually be an important benefit. Like, I want to see the bread and butter handled first. I want to see salaries that get paid on time. I want to see a fair salary. I want to see labor rights. I want to see people protected from being overworked by team owners. And again, best will in the world. There's no getting away from it. You look at some of the work schedules that some of the North American League of Legends teams go through. I don't consider them humane. I've said that publicly. I will never renounce that or retract that until they change. When people are doing 12-hour days for not a lot of fucking money, I don't support that. I don't endorse that. No elite level athlete would ever work to that degree. It's not 6-7 days a week. It's not sustainable. You simply do not do that. So, talking about health insurance and investment planning and how to plan for your future, brilliant. But let's maybe start at the beginning. Let's get people in good working conditions now. Let's make sure team houses aren't just fucking either, on the one hand, the best case scenario, a glorified frat house. On the other hand, like some fucking battery farm for streamers and people just living in abject fucking misery. Not a fan. So the press release continues. It's time for leagues to share the rewards and strategic decisions with the players, said Andy Din, CEO of TSM. And the best way for team organizations to do that is for us to do it ourselves. The PEA is a vehicle for us to work shoulder to shoulder with the players, doing what we all love. Now, Andy Din obviously used to be a player. He was a player owner for a long period of time, built up a very successful brand. With obviously assistance from other people, but built a very successful brand for himself. And this is important, I think, the idea of trying to have a unified front between owners and players. But just so everybody knows, realistically, it can't work. It can never work. There's some of the interests of players and owners are just completely opposed. They can't necessarily work together. And that's why this next part's important. Beyond financial benefits, PEA's management structure will ensure that its pro players have an authoritative voice in league operations. Player representatives will sit on both a rules committee, which will provide guidance on all important issues, including competition format, playing rules, and prizing distribution, and a grievances committee, which will certify that all player concerns are heard and resolved in a timely manner. And this is again important, because that's one thing, again, that's never happened. So this is something PA is doing right. Okay, there's a lot of stuff that is a bit meh, and I'll talk a little bit about why at the end. Well, this is very important. The idea of players being able to dictate a league, we've seen some nonsensical situations in leagues crop up this year in 2016. Decisions that have actively upset players, angered players, that haven't been fair on players, rules that players don't understand, don't like, formats that players don't approve of or want to play under. All of this has to change. We need to kind of come to a uniform decision about what we do with our sport, and the players really should be driving that. There's no doubt about it. They're the people who have to, go into the conditions. For example, I revised my stance on a few things. I used to think, a best of 5 in a final was great, but actually I think they're really grueling, and I don't think they achieve a lot. I think the sheer amount of time and the mental focus required, you're better off with just a best of 3, unfortunately. Whatever sounds great on paper very often isn't realistically the right way to do it. So, and I want to get rid of things like random maps and stuff, and hopefully players can drive this. And certainly PEA sounds like it's got an infrastructure there, which is going to be great for them to be able to do that. So that's very good. Now, the idea of a grievances committee, if that's handled right, that could be a good thing. That could be a very good thing, because obviously grievances are going to crop up. Now, what's very important is whoever sits on that grievances committee, however that grievances committee works, there's a few things that have to absolutely be understood here. It's got to be anonymous. You've got to have anonymity, because you need players to be able to come and air grievances, potentially against owners, to an independent and arbitrary body, who are then going to take that information and act with it in a sensitive way. So that has to be absolutely a fact there. And therefore, it makes me wonder who's going to sit on it. Are they going to elect somebody in, like Wiesa was talking about? Are they going to, are the players going to sit on it themselves, and the grievance is going to bring it to the players? But then you've got the confidentiality issue. So again, that's something that has to be absolutely fine-tuned if it wants to be fit for purpose. Sounds great on paper, but you've absolutely got to get that right. Well, that's going to be very crucial within the context of dealing with things that come up. It goes on. Publisher leagues and third-party tournament organizers aren't sharing profits with the players and teams, said Steve Arnset of Team Liquid. This is hindering the potential for esports to rival other professional sports leagues where players and teams are all aligned to put on the best show year after year, and it names its legal counsel. And that's the end of the press release. Now, again, all fine and dandy. But I thought it was interesting that, first of all, this was very well received. This is very well received by the community, and I think it just goes to show how you frame things is incredibly important. You think about the absolute shit show that was Weezer, where it was leaked by accident by some guy who worked in the printing shop, and then it just snowballed out of control. They lurched from one PR disaster to the other, to the fucking now sadly departed Rob Crosley interview, which remains one of the most hilariously poorly handled interviews in esports history, right? And even though, Rob Crosley did go in wanting to deal out some big fucking backhanders, right? You don't help yourself. Like, it's almost worth fucking revising that again. Like, I can't even fucking believe how bad that was. Like,
so the players give you money, a tiny amount.
Yeah.
Money.
So they do give you money though. But yeah, like just here it is. Just I think the best bit was the part with Pietro Fringuelli. He goes, "So Pietro, you're described as independent." Fringuelli, yeah. Independent from the ESL, independent from the teams. Fringuelli, yep. What safeguards your independence? Fringuelli, nothing. Brilliant, love that. So it just goes to show how you frame things is very important, actually, because Weezer was universally rejected as being a bad thing, and ESL trying to sink their teeth into esports again and control everything. But it's but actually, this is what kind of PEA is as well in that sense. Like, what people are trying to do right now, and I made my tweet basically saying this is an esports Cold War that's going on, and let me be clear what I mean by that. For the longest period of time, people have realized esports is growing. There's money to be had. And what people need to do is they need to go up and start buying up all the properties that they can and basically put themselves in a position where they can make the most profits and have the most control over the product that they have invested into, basically. So now, what we obviously, over in Europe, we had ESL, Weezer, all of this stuff created. And ESL tried an exclusivity league before that. Now, if you look over at, we got the ES4 thing coming from the CIS region, Eastern Europe, and they're looking to control everything. And there's a weird tentative standoff between ESL and ES Force, because they obviously both come round the table with Weezer. But you'll notice that it's the World Esports Association, and there's not a North American team there. And that certainly wasn't because ESL didn't reach out and approach these people. But my understanding is that people thought the offers were completely fucking derisory, and they have a much more confidence in driving what they want to do than they do in ESL driving what they want to do and representing their interests. And I guess on past history, that's kind of fine, isn't it? Like, it's not as if ESL have done a lot to inspire trust from people, which is a shame, because as I've always maintained, they are an industry leader at the end of the day. There's no getting away from that. You take ESL out of esports, that's a void too big to fill. We kind of, like a black hole, we all get sucked in, and the whole thing collapses. So PEA comes along, and now we've got the North American equivalent. And again, you'll notice that it's not just an association, it's a league. There'll be broadcasting rights, there's prize money. This is doing everything. This is a self-contained, holistic league from top to bottom. And eventually, I imagine that what happens is people from PEA, people from Weezer, people from ES Force, which obviously own their own tournament organizers over there and have been running their own leagues. What happens is you now start to enter into strategic partnerships. And because they own teams, or teams own leagues, or teams sit around a board, a table, when it comes to going to the opposition, the competitions, tournaments, well, you don't go, do you? Because why would you help the opposition? So we're actually going to end up in this very fucking fractured state where people aren't going to be cooperative. People aren't going to have to accept that strange bedfellows in business. People are actually going to now have a very valid reason not to support anyone else's projects. unless certain terms and conditions are met. For example, it might be that PEA, and this is just an example, I've not heard this, but PEA might feel so strongly against some of the things ESL have done, they might say to all of the teams in PEA, right, no more ESL events. Well, what does that do to ESL and their investment by purchasing ESEA and moving into the North American territories and having their own studios out there and everything else? What happens then? What happens if there's no North American ESL Pro League anymore? And in fact, in its place, everyone's playing in PEA. Do ESL create franchises and try and bring other teams in? Do they bring in weaker teams and diminish the value of their own product? Who knows what happens? But certainly, this is about leverage, and people now want to maximize profits and maximize control over their product, which, again, not necessarily a bad thing in and of itself. I obviously support that. I support free market ideas, but the issue here becomes, what does it do to the ecosystem? And people don't think about the ecosystem. People instead, they think they only think like 2 steps ahead, and they think, right, okay, well, if we do this, we get more money, we get to do a revenue share, we've got control of everything, and we create our own little empire. You're like, oh, great, sounds great. What happens now? What happens after that? What happens next? What happens if, because you do that, 3 companies go under? Or what if, because you do that, actually all of your organizations get, there's another alliance of 2 other regions and they blacklist you out, and then the PEA fails and now you've got to come crawling back? What happens then? What happens if, because you sell broadcasting rights to a certain partner, what if then, I don't know, say an endemic like Twitch doesn't want to broadcast all of these scenarios can happen because esports is incredibly political, because people realize how fucking high the stakes are. We have unprecedented levels of investment, unprecedented levels of growth, and with that comes unprecedented levels of opportunity. And people really want to capitalize on it now. People feel this is the time where you can get rich from esports, not wealthy from esports. I'm talking retirement money, never work again money, your kids never working again levels of money. And people are very keen to ensure that outcome happens, especially if, like some of these guys have, and, this certainly doesn't apply to a lot of the people in PEA, but, certainly over in Europe, there's people who've been doing this for 10, 15 years, and they feel like, fuck it, it's my time. Look at a guy like Jason Lake. He's been to fucking hell and back, bust once, had to fight to get his brand back from CGS after they went under, had to get it through the courts, and has struggled to get cohesive, decent teams that stay together and represent his brand in the way he wants. And he's done it all on a fucking shoestring, and, very often had to dip into his own personal money continually just to stay afloat. Where's his payday? And I don't blame him for looking for one. I literally don't. So all of these things are considerations. But this is why I think it's going to be a Cold War, because we're going to enter into this very attritional stage of esports where people are literally going to be trying to lock each other out. People are just going to be like, well, we don't want to cooperate with you. If you work with these people, we won't work with you, and we're going to get into a holding pattern. I don't know how that long-term will benefit the players. Maybe players are better off. Maybe players are better off playing less games for more money, even if they take a slight overall knock in their earnings, rather than having to travel everywhere and meet all these online requirements. I don't know what the best roadmap looks like because there's too many moving parts to really predict right now. But certainly, you can see geographically where we all are. This has been set now. The stage is set. PEA in North America, ESL in Europe and some of Eastern Europe, and ES Force in the CIS region, some of Eastern Europe. That's it. If you don't want to play ball with these 3 entities, you're going to have a very bad time. So it is potentially worrying, certainly. But that said, I guess we have to stick to the free market principle that competition is good, right? And that hopefully it will bring the best out of everyone and won't just bring the entire scene collapsing inwardly on itself because people don't work with each other, don't cooperate, and we all retreat into our own little tribes. We actually end up shrinking the pie, not growing it, and the whole, and that's it. It disappears when we kill the fucking scene. So let's hope that doesn't happen. Now, just one other bit of news in relation to PEA was they announced today that Valve will not actively be involved in running the PEA, which implies to me that it isn't going to be Valve sponsored, Valve endorsed. It's not going to be crowdfunded or have any of those elements, because if you want any of those elements, then obviously Valve have a degree of input. But this was reported by PvP Live, and it's just a short little report, but worth mentioning. You can see here that it says, with the announcement of the Professional Esports Association out in the open, we noticed one very conspicuous absence in the release. Players were represented through the Grievance Council and the Rules Committee. Teams were addressed through ownership of the league itself. Even some of the structural questions have been answered as Jason Katz serves as the commissioner at the pleasure of the members of the PEA board, which is made of member team representatives. But who's missing in all of this? Valve. We reached out to Jason Katz for an answer, as well as enforcement on things like VAC bans, which have been issued by Valve and honoured by almost all organisers in the CSGO space. And he said, Valve will not actively be involved in running the PEA, but we're excited to cooperate with Valve and collaborate with them on any issues of mutual concern. We'll be releasing more information on operational details and competition rules in the days to come. So obviously Valve are aware of this. Valve have no issue with this. And again, Valve are very hands-off, very laissez-faire, very into the free market and let the chips fall where they may. So, there's a few questions about how this all ends up. And really, all we can do is kind of speculate right now. We can't actually have a determination about how good this is going to be overall for the scene. Certainly, North America has needed something because until E-League came along, there just wasn't, no disrespect to ESL and what they were trying to do, but they didn't really make the inroads I thought they would when they acquired ESEA and all the fine work they've done. And we're getting to a stage now where I think North American teams are improving, levels of sponsorship are improving, and there is actually kind of a future for North American Counter-Strike that looks a lot more positive. Now, PEA could be a big part of that. We don't really know at this moment in time. But certainly, it's something that we're going to have to monitor because you do not form a $1 million league, a $1 million association, an association that's multi-layered with a commissioner who obviously has ties to Azubu, but I don't think that's going to make any difference whatsoever in the grand scheme. I think they're thinking much, much bigger than just online streaming. So you don't create all of this unless this is about power, control, influence, and making money. You don't go to these lengths. The one final point I want to say is that this could have a knock-on effect for League of Legends, which is really interesting. Now, I've talked to a lot of owners. I talked to some owners who got relegated, and I've talked to a lot of owners in the past who got relegated. And I was like, what's it like after you're relegated? And loads of them are like, do you know what? Operationally, it's brilliant because you save so much money. If you're not in LCS, you actually save a fortune. It becomes, much, much better. So some people kind of feel like maybe we don't need League of Legends right now. And if you remember that, guys like Reginald, guys like Jack were complaining about LCS and how it wasn't a profitable business for them. It wasn't being involved, wasn't a big deal. Well, now they own their own league. And obviously, League of Legends can never be involved in PEA because Riot will simply not allow that. But if these team owners do actually decide to no longer support League of Legends, I think that sinks LCS. I think that is the fucking Titanic hitting the iceberg because we know LCS viewership is so incredibly poor. Even now, while they're doing puff pieces for Polygon going, we have 100 million players. Don't buy that for a second, by the way. But if that's true, then why are your viewing numbers plateauing? Why is it your player numbers are going up, but the viewer numbers for LCS games have kind of plateaued and actually gone down a little bit? Why is that? Your conversion rate actually sucks. You've got more players than you ever have, but you're not driving them towards the esports side of things. And this all ties in with the other video I did about failure to monetize the LCS and how, the crusade and the bullshit was more important than the business. Well, now that PEA, the structure is there, the hires are there, no doubt the sponsors are going to be there, no doubt there's money going to be coming into this league. Maybe these teams don't do League of Legends anymore. Maybe these organizations realize, fuck it, we can go CSGO, we can start an Overwatch league, they can cooperate with other developers. Fuck it. If they make money off it, they could put in new titles that are coming out there. They could put stuff like Smite in, who certainly seem a lot better to work with than Riot, in terms of thinking about organizations and helping profitability and business and sustainability. So with this infrastructure here and the fact that they're going to make way more money off this league than they are off LCS, Riot really need to fucking up their game and take a long, hard look at this because this could be seismic for what they do. If TSM, Cloud9, CLG, brands like that, all just Immortals, all just walk away simultaneously from LCS, well, good luck. Enjoy that. Enjoy watching that. We brought back MYM, everybody. Big sorry. Brilliant. You know what I mean? Fucking, who's going to watch that? No one in the right mind. So this is potentially seismic for the industry, and it's not just about CS:GO. If PEA expands into other games, there's going to be some developers that are either going to fucking have to get on board, or fuck it, they're going to have to head for the hills. So it's a crazy story. I wanted to give a few views on it. Hope they've been enlightening, and see you on the next video.